I never thought I'd walk into my own bedroom and find my wife in bed with another woman. But this wasn't just any woman. It was Claire, our beautiful, seemingly perfect friend. And Claire wasn't exactly who I thought she was. The moment I opened that door, everything I believed about my marriage shattered. My wife, tangled in the sheets with Claire, both of them caught in something I never expected. And the craziest part? Claire had a secret, one that flipped my world upside down in ways I never could have imagined. So, I'm 56, been in the car selling business for most of my life. It's nothing flashy, but it keeps the bills paid, and we've got a comfortable life. I've got a steady routine, Work takes up a good chunk of my day, dealing with customers, chasing leads, managing inventory. It's not exactly thrilling, but it's my bread and butter. Keeps me busy, and there's a sense of satisfaction that comes with closing a deal, especially when you've been doing it as long as I have. I wouldn't call myself fit, but I'm not letting myself go either. I'm in that middle ground, decent shape for my age, but you won't catch me running marathons or anything like that. A bit soft around the edges, but not too bad. You know how it is, staying active just enough to keep the doctor happy, but not exactly living at the gym. Now my wife, Rose. She's 31, looks like she could be in her mid-20s. She's one of those women who's always perfectly put together. Fit, toned, always glowing like she just walked out of a beauty spa. Well, she probably did, to be honest. She spends most of her time on Pilates, yoga, those beauty treatments, and, house stuff. The whole Porsche Pilates mom type. People joke about it, but she really fits that mold. It's like having a trophy wife, and yeah, I know what that looks like from the outside, a guy my age with a younger wife like her. It's something people notice. We're comfortable, not living in the lap of luxury, but there's no struggling either. We have the nice house, the decent cars, we take a vacation or two every year, usually something beachy or resort style. It's a life without financial stress, but it's not like we're jet setting around the world every other weekend. Rose doesn't work, never had to. She's taken on the role of housewife, though we've got help for the cleaning and stuff. She's more into curating her Instagram and staying in shape. That's her world. Mine is making sure we can afford to keep that lifestyle up. Our life together? It's fine. We do the typical stuff, dinners out, occasional weekends away, and the like. But day to day, we're in our own lanes. I'm at the dealership or handling business, and Rose is doing her thing, going from Pilates class to the spa or whatever. It's not like we're constantly attached at the hip. She's got her life, and I've got mine. We got our routines. Sometimes I wonder about the age difference, though. It doesn't bother me in the obvious ways. I've accepted that she's younger and living in a world that's different from mine. But there are moments where I feel like I'm watching someone else's life unfold next to me, and I'm not really part of it. I don't live in the world of Pilates and facials, and she doesn't live in the grind of selling cars and dealing with customers. I'd say we're content, but it's like we're two people living alongside each other, doing what we each need to do to keep this life running smoothly. It works for now. One of the best ways we unwind is hanging out with friends, usually over a weekend. We'll all gather at someone's place, could be mine, could be one of theirs, fire up the grill, crack open some beers or wine, and just chill. It's pretty laid back, nothing fancy, just good food, a little too much to drink, and a lot of conversation. Here's the group. Mike and Linda. They're in their early 40s. Mike's a contractor, and Linda works part-time as a school teacher. They've got 2 kids, both under 10, who are usually running around causing chaos. Mike's the grill master. He takes pride in cooking up some killer steaks and ribs. He's got that easygoing vibe, and he's the guy you can always have a deep, no-nonsense conversation with. Linda's more on the quiet side, but she's sweet. She's the one who's always making sure everyone's glass is full, kind of like the mom of the group. Jason and Sarah. They're both in their early 30s, the youngest couple in the group. Jason's in tech, doing something with software, while Sarah stays home with her toddler. They're the ones who bring the energy. Jason's full of ideas and always talking about some new gadget or app, while Sarah's super bubbly, always smiling. Their kid's still small, so they're balancing that new parent energy. Sarah's big on wine, and she's the one who starts up the games or suggests putting on a movie when the night's winding down. Tom, early 50s, recently divorced. Tom used to be a regular family man, but his marriage didn't last. Now he's just trying to find his footing again. He's kind of the joker of the group, always making light of his situation, even though you can tell he's still figuring it out. Tom works in real estate, so he's constantly busy, but still finds time to hang out. He's usually the one bringing a bottle of something expensive and sharing stories about awkward dates he's been on since the divorce. Melissa, mid-30s, also divorced, no kids. She's the sharp one, works as a corporate lawyer, and has that confident, put-together vibe. Melissa's divorce happened a few years ago, and she seems to be thriving, though she doesn't talk about it much. She's the one who's always dressed nicely, even for a casual barbecue, and she's got this quick wit that keeps everyone on their toes. We joke that she's our legal advisor because she's always got some smart advice on whatever random thing comes up in conversation. When we get together, it's easygoing. Someone's kids are always running around, which adds to the noise, but also gives the gathering that family feeling. There's usually music playing in the background, old school rock, or some chill acoustic playlist. The guys will be around the grill, beer in hand, swapping stories from work or talking about sports, while the women tend to float between sipping wine and sharing updates on life. There's always a lot of laughter, and we get into some pretty good debates, too. Nothing heated, just the kind that comes with being comfortable with each other. We'll eat, drink, maybe throw on a movie toward the end of the night if the conversation starts to slow down. Sometimes we'll break out some cards or a board game if everyone's feeling up for it. And there's always this moment where we're all a bit buzzed, sitting back, looking around, thinking, yeah, this is nice. It's not wild. It's not over the top. It's just good company, good food, and a few hours where life feels simple. I guess in some ways, it's a reminder that despite how different we all are, different ages, different situations, kids or no kids, we all just enjoy being together, having a laugh, and letting go of whatever stress we're carrying from the week. So, one weekend, we're all hanging out like usual, barbecue going, beers in hand, the kids running around, when Jason and Sarah show up with Sarah's sister. I remember Sarah mentioning her before, but this was the first time we actually met her. Her name's Claire. She must have been around 30, maybe early 30s, but man, she looked like she stepped right out of a magazine. Tall, sporty, just really put together in that way that catches everyone's eye without even trying. Silicone breasts, perfect face, everything in place, and she had this low, smooth voice that was kind of mesmerizing, honestly. The kind of voice you just like to listen to, even if you're not fully paying attention to what's being said. She had that polished look, but there was something about her vibe that was more down to earth than you'd expect. She fit right in, though. Started chatting with everyone like she'd been part of the group for years. She was interesting, too. Not just looks. Claire had traveled a lot, lived in a few different cities, worked in marketing or PR, something like that. She had a lot of stories to tell, and they weren't the usual surface-level stuff. She was genuinely engaging, had this way of drawing people into the conversation. Rose and Claire hit it off almost immediately. It's funny, because Rose usually doesn't click with new people right away. She can be a little reserved, especially if she feels like someone's competing with her for attention. But Claire? They found common ground fast. They were off in their own little world talking about Pilates routines, beauty treatments, the best places to get whatever skincare product they were obsessing over, stuff like that. It wasn't just small talk, though. They seemed to really connect, and Rose was smiling more than usual. I caught her throwing a glance in my direction a couple of times, kind of like she was saying, "This one's cool, right?" The rest of us were hanging out, but I'd be lying if I said Claire didn't draw some attention from the guys. It wasn't anything weird, just that she had that presence. She knew how to handle herself, though completely comfortable in the space, not flaunting anything, just natural, I guess, in the way she carried herself. But there was definitely a shift in the room when she was around, like she brought this different kind of energy. As the night went on, Rose and Claire stuck together, and it was kind of nice, actually. Rose doesn't have a ton of close friends, so seeing her connect with someone, especially someone like Claire, felt good. I didn't think too much of it at the time. Just another fun night with the group, but with an extra guest. That night after the barbecue, when we got home, Rose couldn't stop talking about Claire. It was kind of cute, actually. She was genuinely excited, like she'd found a new best friend or something. Rose isn't usually like that with people, so it stood out. She kept going on about how cool Claire was, how easy she was to talk to, and how they just clicked. It wasn't just the usual small talk between them. They were already planning to meet up for coffee the next week, like they were teenagers making plans. Then, almost in passing, Rose mentioned that Claire had a secret. "You'd be shocked if you knew," she said with this little grin, like she was teasing me. But when I asked what it was, she just laughed it off, saying something like, "Oh, I can't tell you. It's Claire's secret, not mine." I shrugged it off. I mean, sure, I was curious, but it didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Maybe Claire had some wild story from her past, or some quirky habit Rose found amusing. I didn't push her for details, and honestly, after a couple of glasses of wine and a night like that, I let it slip from my mind. That night, Rose was in a great mood. We had one of those nights that just felt good, the kind where everything clicks. We stayed up a little later than usual, just enjoying each other's company. It was one of those moments that reminded me why, despite the age gap, despite our different worlds, we worked. Life went on after that, like it always does. Work was busy. I was caught up in the usual dealership grind, and the days started blending together. Rose started seeing Claire more often. They went for coffee, hit up the spa together, and it became clear they were growing close. It was good for Rose, having someone like Claire around, someone who understood the world she lived in, beauty treatments, Pilates, all that stuff I didn't really get. I guess I was glad she had a friend she could bond with on that level. They'd hang out during the day while I was at work, and it became part of our routine. Rose would come home, tell me about their latest coffee date, or whatever new beauty tip Claire had shared. It was nice to see her so animated, so happy, and I wasn't really paying much attention to that secret Rose had hinted at. It felt like one of those things people say in the moment that doesn't really matter later. As for me, I just kept doing my thing, work, hanging out with the guys, more barbecues with the crew. Claire started coming to more of those too. She fit right in, and it was like she'd always been part of the group. I could see why Rose liked her so much. Claire had this way of making everyone feel at ease, like she was the kind of person you could tell anything to. Everything felt normal, comfortable. Life was just rolling along, with Rose and Claire getting closer and our social circle staying tight. Whatever that secret was, it stayed in the background, almost forgotten. Life was too busy to dwell on it anyway. That weekend started like any other, with our usual crowd over: Mike, Linda, Jason, Sarah, Tom, and Melissa, all hanging out in the backyard. The grill was going, the beer was flowing, and everyone was in good spirits. Claire had come along too, of course, and things were pretty much the same as they'd been for the past few months. Casual, fun, easygoing. After a few drinks, Rose and Claire were chatting like they always did, and at some point, Rose casually mentioned showing Claire her perfume collection. It wasn't anything unusual. Rose had a thing for perfumes, a whole shelf full of them in our bedroom, and she loved showing it off to people. They excused themselves, laughing, saying they'd be back in a few minutes. But time passed, and they didn't come back. At first, I didn't think much of it. People drift in and out at these things. Sometimes you lose track of time when you're caught up in conversation. But after a while, I started noticing that the laughter had died down outside, and I wasn't the only one wondering where they'd gone. Mike made a joke about women taking forever with their beauty products, and we all laughed, but something was off. It had been too long. Eventually, I decided to go check on them. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. Just thought maybe they were deep in conversation or lost track of time. I headed upstairs, toward the bedroom, and as I got closer, I heard sounds. At first, I didn't register what it was, but the closer I got, the more it became obvious. My stomach dropped. My heart started racing. I opened the door, and there it was. Rose was on the bed, and Claire was on top of her. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was Claire. Claire had a penis. Claire was transgender, something Rose had clearly known, but I hadn't. They were caught up in the moment, fully involved with each other, and I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My brain scrambling to make sense of what I was seeing, but it just couldn't. Rose, my wife, the woman I'd been married to for years, had been keeping something from me. And Claire, who I thought I'd gotten to know over the past few months, was part of it. My eyes were fixed on the scene, my mind racing to catch up with the reality unfolding in front of me. Claire stopped what she was doing the moment she saw me, her face shifting from surprise to something like guilty relief, like she'd been caught, but also knew this moment was inevitable. "Wait, let's explain," Claire started, her voice shaky, but I couldn't even process it. The room was spinning, my heart hammering in my chest, my ears ringing with disbelief. Rose reached out toward me, her voice low and soft, trying to calm me. "Please, let me talk to you about this. It's not what you think." But it was exactly what it looked like. Claire, this woman we'd been spending so much time with, was transgender. And Rose knew. Not just knew, she had been involved with her, intimately involved. I didn't even know how long I stood there, staring at them, trying to process how this had been happening right under my nose. Everything felt like a bad dream, something I just couldn't wrap my mind around. Finally, without a word, I turned and walked out of the room. I needed air, space, something, anything to clear my head. I headed back downstairs to the backyard where our friends were still hanging out, completely oblivious to the bomb that had just exploded in my life. I somehow managed to sit down, laugh at Mike's joke about the grill, sip my beer like everything was normal. But inside, I was anything but normal. My mind was spinning, my chest tight with shock. How was this happening? How had I missed this? A few minutes later, Rose and Claire came back outside, both looking composed like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just shattered my entire understanding of our life together. I watched them interact with everyone, smiling, laughing, blending right back into the evening as if everything was perfectly fine. And somehow I kept it together. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was survival mode. I don't know, but I made it through the rest of the night. Eventually, the evening came to an end. People said their goodbyes, and soon it was just Rose and me left in the house. As the door closed behind the last guest, the weight of everything settled in the air between us, thick and heavy with all the things that had just happened but hadn't yet been said. Rose looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading, like she was ready for whatever conversation was about to come. I had no idea where to start. We sat down at the kitchen table, the silence stretching out painfully before she finally broke it. "I'm so sorry," she began, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I didn't want her to find out like that. Or maybe I should have told you sooner. I know this is a lot to take in." "A lot," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and anger. "You think? What the hell was that, Rose? What have you been hiding from me?" She sighed, her hands clasped tightly together, struggling to find the words. "That secret I mentioned about Claire, she's transgender. And something about that, I don't know, it drew me in. I can't explain it, but I was curious, attracted to it. I couldn't stop myself. And Claire isn't the first. I've cheated like this before, only a couple of times, but I couldn't resist. I'm sorry." It felt like a punch in the gut. The reality of her words was sinking in, heavy and suffocating. Rose, my wife, had been living this whole other life behind my back, and not just with Claire. "And you never thought to tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You thought I'd never find out?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you. I love you, I do, but this is something I couldn't control. I don't know how to explain it. It's just something I needed." I sat there, completely stunned. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but I was numb. The woman I thought I knew, the life we had built together, it all felt like it was crumbling around me, shattered into pieces I didn't know how to put back together. But in that moment, I just didn't have the energy to fight anymore. After that night, things were tense, to say the least. I mean, how could they not be? The whole situation turned everything upside down, and for a while, I didn't know if we could come back from it. It wasn't just the fact that Rose had cheated, though that hurt like hell. It was how she cheated and the fact that she had been hiding this huge part of herself from me for God knows how long. And with Claire, no less. We kept living together, but things were awkward. There were nights I couldn't even look at her, and other times when we'd talk for hours, trying to make sense of what had happened. I could tell Rose felt guilty, but there was also this relief in her, like she was glad it was all out in the open now. She didn't have to hide that part of herself anymore. But for me, I was stuck between feeling betrayed and trying to understand what all of this meant for us. It wasn't something I could just sweep under the rug. We both knew that. So we decided to go to therapy, couples counseling. That was a first for us. I'd never been one to talk about my feelings with a stranger, but at that point, it felt like we were at a crossroads and I needed help figuring out how to navigate it. The therapist wasn't there to take sides, but to help us unpack everything, all the confusion, the anger, and the underlying issues we had ignored for so long. Talking about it in therapy, we realized that this wasn't just about her attraction to people like Claire or the secret she kept. There were deeper things at play. I learned things about Rose I never even knew, things about her desires, her fantasies, things she had kept buried because she was afraid of how I'd react. And yeah, I won't lie, it was hard to hear. It was dirty, sure, but it was also something that over time I started to understand. Not agree with necessarily, but understand. At first, I couldn't get past the fact that it was cheating, plain and simple. Whether it was with a man, woman, or someone like Claire, almost a woman, it felt like a betrayal. But as we talked more, something shifted in me. The lines between what I considered normal and what actually mattered in our relationship started to blur. It wasn't like Rose was running around with random men behind my back. It was something more complicated, something that had to do with her own identity, her own needs. And Claire, being transgender, wasn't the issue. It was how Rose's desires and needs fit into our life, our marriage. The more we talked, the more I started to see that this wasn't just about sex. It was about Rose trying to figure out who she was, and in some ways, me figuring out who I was too. As much as I wanted to be angry, there was a part of me that was curious. I didn't expect that, but I couldn't deny it. The fact that Claire was so attractive, there was no denying that, made it easier, in a weird way, to see why Rose had been drawn to her. And as much as I hated to admit it, there was something about Rose's dirty wishes that started to intrigue me. Maybe it was the taboo, or maybe it was just the idea of seeing Rose in a new light. Someone who had desires outside the neat little box I'd always put her in. Therapy helped me process it, but it didn't provide any clear answers. What it did was open the door to more conversations between us. Slowly, I started to accept that this wasn't just about cheating. It was about something deeper between us, something that maybe we could explore together, rather than let it tear us apart. We didn't fix everything overnight. Far from it. But we started to rebuild our trust in a new way, on new terms. I had to let go of the idea that our marriage was going to fit some cookie-cutter mold. Instead, we started talking openly about fantasies, desires, things that would have made me uncomfortable before. And as strange as it sounds, accepting Rose's dirty wishes brought us closer in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't easy, but over time, we found a new rhythm, a complicated, messy, but oddly intimate one. Life wasn't the same, and it probably never would be. But somehow, we kept moving forward, together. That night was unlike anything I ever imagined would happen in my life. It started out so normal, like any other dinner we've had with friends, except this time, it was just the three of us, me, Rose, and Claire. I knew what was on the table, what the night might turn into, but even then, it still felt surreal. The whole idea of it, of me being involved in this, was wild. But after everything that had happened, all the conversations, all the therapy, and how far we had come with our trust and openness, I found myself agreeing to it. Something inside me was curious, excited, nervous as hell, but I couldn't deny the pull. We had dinner, and at first it was casual, like nothing unusual was going on. A couple of glasses of wine helped ease the tension, and soon enough, the conversation started flowing freely. We laughed, joked, talked about life just like we always did. But there was this electricity in the air, this unspoken tension that buzzed between us. Rose and Claire kept exchanging glances, these little smiles that hinted at something more, and I could feel my pulse quicken with each passing minute. After a while, the three of us moved to the living room, still sipping on wine, and that's when things started to shift. Rose was sitting next to Claire, and I could tell they were getting closer, more intimate. Then, out of nowhere, Rose leaned in and kissed Claire right in front of me. It wasn't a quick kiss, either. It was slow, deliberate. At first, I just sat there, my brain not fully registering what was happening. It was such a strange mix of emotions, shock, excitement, disbelief. I wasn't sure if I should look away or keep watching. But I didn't have to decide because the longer I watched, the more everything blurred together. It was like something clicked inside me. Rose had talked about her desires, about the things that excited her, and now I was seeing it firsthand. And instead of feeling jealous or betrayed, I felt drawn in. I couldn't explain it. It was like the taboo of the whole thing made it even more intense. They kept kissing, and then Rose looked over at me, her eyes dark and inviting, like she was waiting for me to make the next move. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands sweating, but I got up, walked over to them, and suddenly I was part of it. There was no turning back at that point. We made our way to the bedroom, and everything that happened after that was a blur of sensation, emotions, and pure craziness. It was me, my beautiful wife, and Claire, this gorgeous, confident, exotic woman. It was the kind of night that was so far out of my comfort zone, so far from anything I ever thought I'd be part of, but there I was fully in it. Every moment felt like it shouldn't be happening, like I was breaking some invisible rule. And yet it was also intoxicating. It was messy, wild, and completely uncharted territory for me. I didn't know how to process it, but at the same time, I couldn't stop myself from going along with it. The combination of Rose, her desires, and Claire's presence just made everything feel like a fever dream. When it was over, I lay there in the silence, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. It was so crazy, so far beyond anything I could have imagined for my life. And yet, I didn't regret it. It felt like we'd crossed some kind of line that I didn't even know existed. I had no idea what this meant for us going forward, but for that night, I was just caught up in the whirlwind of it all. It was the kind of experience that I'd never forget, no matter how hard I might try to make sense of it later. After that night, life somehow settled back into its usual rhythm, at least on the surface. I went back to work, handling the car dealership and dealing with the regular grind, while Rose continued her routine of Pilates, coffee dates, and beauty treatments. To the outside world, nothing had changed. Our friends had no idea what was going on behind closed doors. As far as they knew, we were just the same couple they'd always known, me, the older guy in a steady business, and Rose, the vibrant, sporty young wife. But inside our home, things were different. There was this unspoken agreement between Rose and me now, a kind of acceptance of the new dynamic we had fallen into. Claire remained a regular part of our lives, but not in a way that anyone else would notice. She'd come over for dinners, for drinks, sometimes even joining us at gatherings with friends, blending into our social circle without raising any suspicion. What no one knew was that Claire had become more than just a friend to Rose, and, in a strange way, more than just a friend to me too. The three of us continued to meet up privately. It wasn't every week, but often enough that it felt like a regular part of our lives. These meetings had turned into something that, while it still felt taboo, also became this odd source of excitement and escape. It was like we had a secret world that no one else was part of. I didn't tell anyone. Neither did Rose. Our friends remained blissfully unaware, and I never gave them a reason to suspect anything. When we had our usual barbecues and get-togethers, it was business as usual, laughing, sharing stories, the same old routine. But now, when I'd catch a glimpse of Rose and Claire exchanging a look or sharing a quiet conversation, I'd be reminded of what was really going on. In a way, I'd come to accept it. What had started as a complete shock, Rose's cheating, her attraction to Claire, and then my involvement, had slowly evolved into something I could live with. Maybe even something I'd grown to enjoy. It was bizarre, no doubt about it, but I couldn't deny that it had sparked something new in our relationship. We talked more, were more open with each other, and despite how crazy it all was, we were closer than we had been in years. I never thought this was where my life would lead. I'd always seen myself as the straightforward guy, living a comfortable, uncomplicated life. But Rose's secret, her desires, had pulled me into something I never would have explored on my own. And strangely enough, I didn't hate it. I didn't resent her for it anymore. It was just part of our reality now, our new normal. So, that's how it all unfolded. What started as Rose's cheating turned into something else entirely. We kept it hidden from the world, kept living our lives like nothing had changed. But behind closed doors, things had changed in ways I never would have imagined. It wasn't the life I expected, but somehow, it became the life we were living. And in its own twisted way, it worked for us. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. New cheating wife stories tomorrow.